I'll tell you what, Mercedes won't be winning the Constructors' Championship anytime soon if their drivers keep falling over.
Yeah,
but that's the thing.
Let's talk about that, Niran. That is a very good segue.
But again, we talked about the two driver lineups with the Mercedes and Red Bull. So we're going to get onto the Mercedes driver lineup now. But if they had an equal car, how much would Checo be a disadvantage? But how much would Lewis and George be fighting against each other, taking points off each other?
Yeah.
So there's a balance.
There is a balance.
How do Mercedes manage these two? They've signed them up for another 2 years.
That's going to be great.
Like,
it's going to be so good.
Do you know what's scary is that we've seen a lot of these, relationships go bad. I've never seen it end up good after it's already started. Like after cracks have started to show, I've never seen it end up well. Like, I mean,
I can't see it get any better.
Sergio Perez, there was cracks with like Max and Checo, but they were nowhere near as close as Lewis and George are. I've never seen like this relationship be repaired, so I'm honestly not sure if it even can be. Like, it just needs to be contained, if that makes sense.
I think we'll have to see how good their car is next year and how much it suits one driver versus another. Because let's say it suits Lewis more. I don't think they'll have that problem because Lewis will most of the time will be ahead. But for this year, typically the W14 has been on a bit of a knife edge. So to get it into the right operating window requires like extreme amount of precision and almost like luck at times, because sometimes they don't even know why. Very track
specific as well.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they don't even know why the car's fast. And when you have either one driver ahead of the other, or you get that you get flashpoints like that where they cross over each other on track, trip over each other like today. Lewis was at the end of his first stint. I think probably had dirt on his tires or something after running off track and was trying to defend, forced George wide. Obviously, George was pissed about it.
And then Lewis just boxed straight away.
But it was to maintain position, which understandably so. But at the same time, at the back of George's mind, he's like, I have to get my own back. If that's
they're both in the wrong.
And you said actually, it's very different. Like when you're on the same strategy and genuinely fighting for position, that's one thing. But then, like you said, when you're on an alternative strategy, then you do have to work together. Then it is for the good of the team, but that comes from the management. Toto wasn't here. I don't know who was managing Mercedes. Like I didn't get a chance to kind of see, but yeah, it's going to come down to the management.
It does. It just feels like there's no like club captain at the moment. No one's going like, right, lads, come on. I know you both want to be number one driver. I know you're both great, but like,
I mean, realistically though, it should be Lewis. He's been there the longest. He's won 6 championships with them. He's won however many races.
He's still the best driver right now. I think obviously, history is one thing, but like Lewis is still, I think we're starting to see that there is there's a step toward, compared to Lewis when it comes to, George. But
George is 75 points behind him in the championship.
Yeah.
I think George is carrying a degree of frustration here as well. Like,
Facts.
Bear in mind, like he spent 3 years in the Williams, seeing Lewis and Valtteri get all these wins, and he feels like he should have been promoted earlier. Didn't, gets promoted, and then he gets promoted to the Mercedes W13, which was fucking awful.
Wheelbarrow 13.
Yeah.
And also he's not, again, who knows, maybe if 2021 goes different, maybe Lewis isn't in the sport anymore, retires with 8, I don't know, maybe. I think George was always hoping to, Mercedes were kind of, their hand was forced to promote George because he's a quality driver, obviously, and to leave him in Williams for any longer, wasn't really tenable. I mean, Williams were trying to replace him.
Chance of
I
losing.
think Red Bull would have probably snapped him up.
Williams were trying to replace him when they were really short on money.
Like K-Mag in 2020.
That was it.
He was in his book or something.
Yeah, and K-Mag were like, how can I take this team seriously if they're trying to replace me with George, not with Latifi? He's like, no, this is not a serious team. And so
it's not a serious organisation.
No. And so I think, I think that frustration, and I think George feels a degree of entitlement to be able to come in, and which I get. And again, I think a lot of these drivers have a big ego. I think we see that a lot from George, and I think he expresses himself a lot, and he doesn't get the most liked. He's not the most liked because obviously Lewis has got a huge fan base and big support, and I think coming in and trying to upset the apple cart, kind of how when he came in alongside Fernando at McLaren.
Yeah.
It's almost that there are similarities, I think.
Yeah.
To that kind of dynamic.
Yeah, definitely. Because he is competitive. Let's not get it wrong.
Against 8 all in qualifying, that's
and
any level.
I think the thing with George is like, I feel Mercedes really want him to do well, but sometimes he gets in his own way. So for example, like there's just very, very small mistakes, but they always add up. So like, you know, you mentioned he's like 70 points down in the championship. The crash in Singapore, obviously, didn't help.
Yeah. Canada as well.
Canada, a couple times, you know, during qualifying, tripping over Lewis in Spa and
in Spain as well.
Yeah. So, you know, I feel as though Mercedes, they have the ability to manage it. But, you know, it requires cooperation from both drivers. At the end of the day, if, you know, Toto can sit there and say like, oh yeah, guys, please don't do this, or, you know, keep the cars let's bring both the cars home. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's up to them to do that. And I feel like George is a little more of a loose cannon than Lewis. Lewis is a lot more experienced. He's generally a very clean driver. So, you know, when he hits something like that, he would obviously abide by it. But with George, there's a bit of that kind of wanting to prove himself. He's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder.
I think, like Tommo said, I do think there is a little bit of entitlement with George, and he just kind of needs to realize that, you know, he should be a world champion one day. He's got the speed. There's no doubt that he's got the raw speed. He needs to harness it in the right way. But like when he was beating Lewis at the beginning of the season in qualifying, Lewis just grit his teeth. Like we didn't hear anything, you know, from Lewis really. Now, like, you know, Lewis has really kind of stepped it up, or, you know, just, you know, started qualifying a little bit better as well, like we saw in this race. And it's just, I don't think George can take being the number 2 a little bit, and he just needs to realize that your time will come. And unless you're absolutely just quicker than Lewis right now in terms of raw speed, out qualifying, out racing him, then you've got like an argument to kind of be the guy. But at the moment, he just needs to calm down just a little bit, make sure every single time he's working with the team. There was a bit of entitlement just at the moment. You know, Lewis is more entitled to feel like that, but we don't see that from him. You know, he's the one that's won 6 world championships at that team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it just ego control just a little bit from George, and I think it might help him.
Yeah, because and as well, I think like where Lewis is so established within that organization, you know, George, I don't know. I'm just not like, we've seen these moments of these lapses where he's made these errors, and it does, I think, call into question to a degree whether he's got the kind of, I guess,
leadership.
And the attitude to, I think composure is a good word, to get it over the line, because I think we've seen, you know, other drivers fighting similarly. Like, for example, I think Lando's demonstrated more composure than George.
Definitely.
In Singapore.
In those, in those tough moments where you've got to just get it right. And it's, again, George going out in Singapore, that's a matter of centimetres, right? But that's the difference. Lando scraped the barrier and was fine. Yeah. George scraped it a little bit more and wasn't fine.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. So, you know, you've been in Singapore. You had a really good weekend up until that point, but we talk about those fractions. You should kind of get off your pedestal just a little bit for this race. Like, you're the one that kind of let the team down a little bit. Just make sure that you're working together, kind of restore that kind of, you know, trust in yourself.
Yeah, coming back in and beefing your teammates straight away is...
especially when you're on different strategies.
He's got to play the long game, innit? He's got to play the long game.
He has. It's just hard in the heat of the moment, obviously, because, like, again, he does feel wronged off the bat, because Lewis has shoved him off the track. And I totally get
And Lewis was wrong, by the way.
Lewis was wrong for that, because you're pitting that lap. Just let him through.
But also,
there's literally no point.
And maybe that was just Lewis making a mistake. Maybe he didn't, like, you know, obviously getting frustrated when you're pushed off, you know, who knows, right, intent, teammate, right? It's like when Oscar ran into Lando in Monza.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that was intentional. I think just Oscar misjudged.
And nothing came from it. No, I don't even think I heard any team radio.
No, it was fine. It was just like, I'm sure Oscar was just like, yeah, my bad. Like, you know, I thought I had more temp in my tyres. My bad. Like, you know what I mean? I just think that it's frustrating to see. Well, it's frustrating, but it's also entertaining.
Yeah, it is entertaining.
It was like the best thing about that race.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Apart from watching, I've never been so excited to see a driver just stood in the pits. Like, apart from watching Sergio Perez in the pits for no reason.
Yeah,
the Mercedes thing was like the best thing ever.
The thing George needs to remember, Lewis is not signing another 2-year deal like he has if he doesn't think, I'm going for an 8th world title.
Mercedes can give him the car to do that.
Yes, and so George knows, like, which again, that ball's in his court. You know, to prove that he, you know, if that Mercedes car does get competitive at the front, then he's got to beat Lewis fair and square.
Yeah, but then it does circle back to that point of, you know, team management. And I'd say, like, in that specific scenario, especially if you're going up against Red Bull, you can't afford to be taking points away from each other. You just can't. For example, Singapore was probably their best chance at getting a win all season. And if you flip the roles, if you had Lewis ahead of George in that specific scenario, I know George obviously had track position from qualifying and whatnot, but if Mercedes had said, all right, Lewis, you have better pace, you are probably more likely to win this race, let's invite the cars.
Yeah.
Lewis would have done it. You know, in my opinion, he's proven it time and time again that he can make up that difference, or you know, at least in the pressure moments,
deliver.
He has the ability to deliver. And yeah, in a championship fight, you can't afford to have those kinds of debates about.
I don't think
2007.
Just to not be all
Kimi came in out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Just to not be all doom and gloom. Like at the end of the day, Mercedes, in my opinion, still have on raw pace the strongest driver lineup. I mean, I've done so many polls about this, like maybe 2 races ago. Who has the strongest driver lineup? Mercedes still come out emphatically on top. It's not even close. So yes, if I did the poll right now, like McLaren might come out on top, but you know, over a course of the season, they still have 2 drivers with so much pace. And like, if you get them working right with the right management, the right environment, you know, it could be scary hours for Red Bull if the cars were close.
Yeah, definitely.
That is it. It's just control. It is just control.
It's not all bad.
I can't. It's going to take a lot for them to pull it back, I think.